Hi, I'm Rashida, also known as the Chart Goddess, and this is I think it's my second video on here on YouTube, but I wanted to take you all through how I analyze my chart for supply and demand, how I mark up or what I need to do through the process of getting ready to enter a trade. So this is not a detailed video. It's very quick and straight to the point, but I hope you all can understand how I analyze the charts with supply and demand for my entries. If you have any comments or questions, just drop them below and I will be sure to answer them for you. What I am going to do today, this is my very first video in showing you how to look at supply and demand, okay? And then also how I personally like to trade supply and demand. You can trade it any way that you want to trade it, but this is how I personally trade supply and demand based on how I learn. First thing, I'm going to clear off my screen. I'm going to remove these drawings, and my screen looks like this for educational purposes. I want to make sure that you all can see everything clearly, but I start off looking at what the weekly has done so far. Okay, so I mark up my weekly high, mark up my weekly low, then I go to my daily high and I mark up my previous day high, and I also mark up my previous day low. Okay. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to see what happens when price move to these levels. Okay. If I get a rejection off of a key level, and if it closes, like right now, let's say Bitcoin closes below this previous day low, I know that it's going to continue to sell. Well, where is it going to continue to sell to? Where on the daily, we have a daily demand zone, okay? So I will mark up my daily demand. But I do typically trade on the 4-hour demand zone, okay? But I want to know what is price showing me. And anytime you're marking up supply and demand, you can know when the institutions are in the market based on the volume in the candles that it leaves behind, okay? So from there, I go to my, excuse me, my 4-hour chart, and I look to see if there's any demand zones on here that has yet to be mitigated, okay? So this is going to be my closest demand zone. Now, typically how I trade from supply and demand is I like to see a tap into my zone, and then I also like to see rejection out of that zone followed by momentum. Okay, so once I have my 4-hour chart, I drop down to my 1-hour chart, and this is just me. This is how I line up, my possibilities, right? So I have, excuse me, let me put this on. Excuse me, we're going to do weekly low. Okay. Now, based on what I know about order blocks and supply and demand, the weekly candle, this was the low and this was the high. Okay. So I'm automatically knowing that anything within this candle is called internal range liquidity. And if price has traveled there before, guess what? It's going to do it again. Okay. So what I look for when I'm doing entries is a tap into this zone, a rejection followed by momentum. Okay, so from there I either enter on my 5-minute chart or my 1-minute chart if I'm scalping, but it's mainly like 1 minute for an entry, and then I like to hold the position and manage it, you know, on the 5 and 15, right? So in order for me to get in, what I'm looking for is a rejection out of my zone followed by momentum, right? And this have yet to tap my zone. So am I going to get in on that? No. I need a tap down into this zone, which is going to give me a break of structure from the downside, right? And then price should manipulate or, you know, reject out of that zone and give me momentum out of it. So what do I mean by that? And when you start to understand like how supply and demand works, you'll just see the same patterns over and over again, right? What I need to see coming out of a demand zone is this pattern here, right? If you notice, when you're trading, price is going to create another demand zone from a demand zone. Okay, so for instance, we have a tap into this zone, right, which is, these are your imbalances, or, you know, people like to call them fair value gaps. But we have a tap into this zone, and so once we have a tap into that zone, it gave me momentum or imbalances, or, you know, whatever you want to call them, fair value gap. It gave me that coming out of there. So I would enter here for my entry. I'm just showing you how I would have entered off of this zone. This would have been my entry point. Okay, now this is Bitcoin. You don't want to over leverage in Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I love trading Bitcoin because Bitcoin respects structure so well, right? Me personally, I would put my stop loss around here if you're starting off, but me trading this, I would put my stop loss here because I know this is the most recent low. If price closes below this, then I need to be looking for, you know, a better entry, right? So my stop loss is going to be here. And my TP is going to be, or take profit, typically is going to be another supply zone. But if I'm not mistaken, this, let's see what we have here. So if this is my stop loss, let's go back over here. Sorry, y'all, because I want to show y'all what I mean, right? So if this is my stop loss on a 15-minute time frame, this is my entry point. My take profit would have been supply zone or that previous high or that all-time high, right? Price is always going to travel back from supply to demand. In order for it to go to a demand zone, it has to reach a supply zone, sell down to a demand zone, right? And it's going to do the same thing over and over again. Okay, so for this particular one, I would have, you know, taken my TP at that supply zone that I showed you on the higher time frame. Now, what I'm looking for in this case is for price to come back down, not break through this previous, like not close below this zone, right? I don't want it to close below this zone, because if it closed below this zone, then I know that I need to be looking for a better entry. Okay, now what am I looking for when it comes to an entry from here? Because as traders, we do not enter at a premium. We always enter at a discount. So you buy low, you sell high. What I'm looking for is a sweep of this high and a manipulation down And two, let me show you. Let's zoom in. This particular zone here, which is a demand zone that was created from another demand zone. So I'm looking for a sweep into this. Even if it goes back and sweep this low again, I don't want to see a closure below this. I need to see a sweep and an instant rejection out of this zone in order for me to get into a trade, right? And so once I have all of my confluences added up, I see what it's doing on the previous day low or the previous day high on my key levels. I can see that, right? Once I see that, then I ask myself, what is price doing in this level? If I see price close through a key level like a previous day high, a previous weekly high, or something like that, that candle closure is the first indication to me of the direction that this trade could go, right? So for me, what I like to do is, keep my chart markups here because I've noticed that price travels back to it. So more than likely price is going to travel somewhere in this area, sweep down and come back up for a return of an all-time high. But you just have to know that in order for a price to keep moving and in order for it to keep reaching all-time highs, it has to have momentum. And where does it grab momentum from? It grabs momentum from either supply zone or a demand zone, okay? Now also, if you're in a bullish market, you don't want to be selling. You can scalp, some time frames are selling, some time frames are buying. But me personally, if I'm in a bull market and I can clearly see that we're in a bull market, regardless of a retracement, I am not looking to sell, okay? Because at any moment, it could hit a demand zone, right? And it can turn around. So I would rather wait for clear indication of a demand zone being tapped into and a rejection out of it, right? So you see how on the higher time frame, like on the 4-hour time frame, this rejected out of this area right here. What I would need is another sweep or momentum candles stating that we're returning back bullish, right? And the only way to really determine on a higher time frame if we're going back bullish, we would need a break of structure above this previous day high and this weekly high, if this makes sense. A previous week high, if this makes sense. So this is just a very brief, not detailed way that I analyze the charts. I love wick entries, so sometimes I will go down to my 1 minute time frame. I will find a zone there, and I use my 5-minute orb and my supply and demand together because the strategies are interchangeable, and you get demand or supply zones from the 5-minute orb. Okay, and that's also a key level. Price tends to retrace back to those levels, right? So in my mind, I know if I enter on a 1 minute off of the orb, that price is going to go back to that level or that zone, and it's going to retrace out of it. But hopefully you understood like how I analyze the charts. Once price has touched the key level, showed me what it was going to do for the day, the next day I do the same thing over and over again. I keep my weekly highs intact and my weekly lows intact because I want to see where price could travel to. But each day I'm like, okay, well, yesterday bought, of course I need for a bullish candle to close above another high in order for it to continue going. But in this case, we didn't get a candle closure above this high, which is why it's selling, right? So on the daily, this 4-hour demand zone shows right here, and then we do have a daily demand zone which will tap all the way back into 114. Hopefully it doesn't do that. It just gains enough momentum to, continue on. But hey, this is Bitcoin, we never know. But I love trading Bitcoin because Bitcoin respects market structure so well. So if you have any questions about anything, just let me know. I just took you through how I analyze the charts, what I look for when it comes to entries, how I do my stop loss, my take profits, and things of that nature. If you have any more questions about anything, just comment below. And if you're in my community and you see this video, then drop the question inside of the Discord. But if you're on YouTube, you see this and you have any questions, feel free to comment below. And yeah, my name is Rashida, also known as She. I am the chart goddess, and this is my analyzation on how I take trades off of supply and demand.